my team is saying that they don't feel like I show up vulnerably. This is like many, many years ago. And
Mm.
I was shocked to hear that. I'm like, oh, I show up authentically. Like you don't let us ever feel like we can experience weakness.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like,
Welcome to the Let Me Save You 25 Years podcast. I am your host, Shawn David Nelson, founder of Lovesac. Today's Shawnism. I'm dead sexy. You're going to love this. Let me tell you the story. I was 21 years old, just back from my mission where I learned Mandarin Chinese, that whole story. I had been a waiter before, paying my way through the first bit of college, and I'm a waiter again at this little Italian restaurant. But my sister gives me the idea of, you should really go work for the New Yorker downtown because, the tabs will be like $200-$300, big tips on that. But, most of the servers at a place like that, these are like professional waiters. This is like their job. They're in their 30s and 40s and 50s, they have like big experience. And I went in there to the biggest restaurateur in Salt Lake City at the time and filled out their application. And it said, prior experience. And I just had like one little stint waiting tables. So I just instead left it blank and I put, after all my personal information, in the experience row of the job resume, I said, I'm dead sexy. That's it. And turned it in, got a call back and, hey, is this Shawn? And she's already laughing. And she's like, all right, you got to come back for an interview. And I got the job. I got the job off of a job application that just basically read, I'm dead sexy, like in my qualifications. And of course I was joking. I was quoting Austin Powers. But like the point is, I took a bold move. I took a bold approach. Everyone else probably had, 5 bullets, 5 lines of qualifications. And that was all I had. But I had an attitude. And for a place like that, they kind of wanted an attitude. And I got the job. So it's all about taking risks, standing out, being remarkable. One thing about Lovesac's culture is we have remark-able in our strategic guide language, our values and different words and phrases we celebrate at Lovesac. Remarkable is one of them. Because you know what? Perhaps every other job application was forgettable. You may not have liked it, but it was remarkable. Lovesac's name is remark-able. People can't walk by our stores without making a dirty joke to their friend or, singing Love Shack by the B-52s or something, but they're remarking, they're saying something out loud. You may not like it, but it's causing you to remark. Are you a remarkable person? Are you dead sexy? How can you become that? We're going to break it down with one of the world's foremost experts, a leadership coach, an author. You're going to love this. We talk about how being dead sexy is really about being honest and confident and humble and vulnerable. Authenticity is ultimately what people find attractive. Be a beginner, right? Put ourselves in situations where we are a beginner, because on the other side of being a beginner is play. We're going to get more play in our life if we're pushing ourselves to be a beginner more often. Fear can take hold and will drive the bus of your life if you don't choose to drive it with your own strengths, right? Being hard on yourself is often not helpful. We talk about our self-talk and inner dialogue and how to manage that. Being bold and leading with your heart. And relating to last week's episode, lead with curiosity, not fear. By the way, we are doing a special episode of this podcast, Ask Me Anything. The way you participate is to ask me anything you want, and I'll form a podcast around it in the reviews section of this podcast. Wherever you're listening to it, Apple Pods, Spotify, YouTube, ask me anything. Slide a question in as a review. Leave your handle if you like. We'd love to know who it came from. You can make it anonymous if you prefer. Love to at least know your first name, but love to also know who you are, what you're doing. And I will turn your question into at least a portion of that Ask Me Anything podcast. I would really love to hear what you would like to know from me. But here we go with I'm Dead Sexy and Ingrid Hu Dahl. Check it out. Okay, folks, buckle up because today's episode is bringing the bold. You know, those moments when someone walks into the room, drops a truth bomb, drops the mic, and everybody's paying attention. That is the energy that we are tapping into today. The topic, one of my favorite Shawnisms of all time, I'm dead sexy.
Yeah, baby.
Now, don't get it twisted. It's not about looks, not about confidence only. It's about knowing when to say something that cuts through the noise, can stand out, and make you unignorable, something remarkable. To break that down with me today is someone who lives that philosophy out loud. She's a powerhouse author, inspiring speaker, transformative leadership coach who's helped creative minds, founders, change makers, even Lovesac step into their full unapologetic self. She's guided global youth movements, co-founded groundbreaking programs, coached everyone from artists and execs on how to lead with authenticity and presence. She's a musician, live on stage, here with us today virtually. Please welcome the ever fierce and endlessly insightful Ingrid Hu Dahl.
Thanks, Shawn. Oh my God, I love the energy. And look how rock star this cover is. I mean, come on. Like, can
Yeah.
we just agree? Who doesn't want to jam out to this?
So those of you not watching, Ingrid is showing off her brand new book that's like so fresh it smells like a new car.
Sun shining on morning so. Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I grew up, was born in 1980, mixed race. What was pretty fierce and rock star and bold of my parents is they were interracial 13 years after it was legalized in this country. So I was born, I was a cold February afternoon and immediately came out screaming, kind of as if like I had a mic in my hand. So that's where the journey begins. So for those of you who want to continue the journey, but it also includes an entire chapter on being a touring rock musician and using that as a way to support young girls to find their voice, especially when a lot of self-esteem drops in like that preteen era and the mean girl culture sort of comes out like fiercely and strongly. That's not bold. That's totally damaging.
Three
So what
daughters,
are
by the
ways
way,
that we,
three daughters
yeah, so
living
I
right
get
now,
you.
like
Oh my God.
17, 13, and 11. Imagine that.
Damn. So you know as
Oh,
dad.
I know. And it
Uh-huh.
is, what's the right word, man? It is heartbreaking because
Mhm.
these are girls who can do everything. They play guitar, they play piano, they can speak to adults, they speak
Mm.
Chinese.
Oh, hey, 你好吗?
我很好，你呢？我也是中国人，你不知道吗？嗯，
哇，你不是，你是
我不像吗？
美国人。
我一点都不像。Um, they're just amazing people and they're facing this crisis that you mentioned. So we'll get into that. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about that because I can take all the advice. But yeah, keep going. So you're living through this teenagedom.
And it sucks. It's really hard to grow up as a teenager, and music for sure was an outlet, but it was quite lonely, and I felt very silenced. I was being asked, "What are you?" every day since I was 5 by adults. And really that question is like, "What's your ethnic background?" I can't
Right.
pigeonhole you. I want to. I
Mm,
had early experiences where I realized, nighttime and the public streets are actually not safe. There are people kind of like predatory, and that makes young girls super angry because they're like, why don't I have a space and a runway to have liberation in my spirit? My very first taste of liberation as a young kid at 5 was truly horses and horseback riding. Horses are such a symbol of big, bold heart and power, internally fueled power. The speed of which they run, the muscles, the connection that you have to have with them. The nonverbal communication is so profound. And that was my first foray into being bold and being dead sexy, was really like, how do you communicate with this fierce animal and build trust?
Yeah. Horses. I love that. And what a cool entree. What a cool aspect of your life to be exposed to that,
Learned a
especially
lot.
at 5 years old. Yeah. The closest I think I can get with my girls is I've raised them riding dirt bikes, which is sort of like
Nice.
the mechanical version, not the same, and
Totally.
not the same nonverbal relationship, but uh, you know, you know what? I'll share a quick story. Nothing made me more proud than seeing my youngest daughter just a few months ago ride in this off-road desert race, and I'm filming. It's the little kids loop, but she comes bouncing up over this hill. She's getting passed by you know, boys who have been, riding in their backyard since they were 4 years old. But she's out there doing it. She gets bucked off on a rocky section, piles into a, pile of rocks. And I can't help her, right? Like I'm kind of 100 feet away trying to take pictures. And I'm kind of running towards her. She's picking up her bike. She's covered in dirt. She's scratched up the bikes, but she, without even hesitating, picks it up, gets it going into neutral, gets it started, proceeds on. It's probably happened to her half a dozen times. Like, and by the way, she's not any kind of tomboy. She's not any kind of, she's all girl, but like, but that's what she's been exposed to. And there's nothing that makes me more proud than to see them. And that's why I love it. Right. Because they learn this
Mm,
independence. Like I can't help her. That's the point. There's a lot of things where as a parent, you know, even skiing, you can kind of carry your kid down the hill a little bit. You can kind of click in their ski. They're really just kind of on their own a little bit with these dirt bikes. And so while it's not the same, I can appreciate what that must have done for you as a young person. And horses scare
absolutely.
me, you know?
Yeah, they can be very scary. Yeah, and I find that your daughters, plural, but the story that you're sharing is like that badass riot girl spirit, and you as a parent giving the space to, like, not try to save and let them have that experience is dead sexy, in my opinion. Like, that's what we should be doing as leaders too. And I think my book also helps parents understand, like, man, we we underestimate how much young kids know,
Hmm.
and they don't always have the language to ask very specific questions like I do as a coach, right? I know how to ask what questions and listen to understand. Most adults don't. And also teenagers don't. So they kind of like coexist in this space where they're missing each other when there's really deeper opportunities to connect and relate and to inform. I often wish I could have gone back in time and asked my mother, who's a tech pioneer, like, truly, what's going on for you? Like, are you finding that this is a tough space? Um, I keep hearing you re-record your voicemail outbox. Like, what's happening where you feel so othered by your accent? You
Hmm.
know, what advice would you give me as a young woman who is so bold, and I think it terrifies you a bit, when I go into the adult world and the career, what have you learned that you wanna impart on me? Like, it's not, that's just not the kind of language that we're asking, at that age, and I wish I had, because now I can't. My mom passed 3 years ago.
That's interesting. So you feel looking back, you observed these things and had these thoughts about your mom as an adult, but it didn't occur to you to ask, and now you're reflecting on it.
Yes, I didn't have the language. I didn't know how to ask.
Yeah, what about the idea then of us as, let's say, parents or as the adults
Mm,
in the world proactively heading that off? That's got me thinking about like how vulnerable am I with my kids? How much
mhm,
do I stop to explain what I'm doing, where I'm going, why it matters? Obviously like they see glimpses of me, let's say working or coming and going or doing all sorts of things. So through that lens, how do you reflect on that?
I would say in the moments where you feel like, "Oh, shit," or, "Oh, man, I had a bad moment. I didn't show up great at home." Literally being like, "I'd love to invite you girls. Do you wanna, like, talk about this and hear my process? Because 'Cause I've been going through some stuff and it's been stressful and, I wanna share that with you." Like, it's sorta interrupting whatever
Mm.
narratives they might be coming up with, they might be digesting, ingesting.
You think kids are ready for that? You think kids
Yes.
would like to hear that?
And I think it's a good model that, hey, when I'm going through stuff, it's a really important moment to have reflection and also to share and engage and connect. I don't have to do this alone.
Yeah, I don't think that's really occurred to me much. I'm someone who really prides themselves on being an engaged parent, probably because I'm not naturally good at it. And what I mean by that is, uh, as an example, I have a morning mantra. Like I have a little routine, and like anyone probably should in the morning of some kind. And I repeat certain phrases to myself, and I remind myself to put down my phone and look in their eyes and say yes to them if they want to play, even if it's inconvenient, and I find that
Mm.
because I've repeated that so many times, it creates a confirmation bias where when I don't have that reaction naturally, I'm more aware of it because I
Mm,
kind of program myself, because I know that naturally I'm so task oriented. I'm so striving that if I'm not careful, I'll, you know, text my way through dinner or this or that, and so I really
mhm.
have to like manage myself because I'm just not naturally that great of a person, I think, in terms of like human interactions.
Well, it's a journey for us all, but don't you think it would be amazing to tell your girls, if you haven't already, like, "Hey, I'm really task oriented, and it's actually takes a lot of concentration for me to let go of that, but I really do actively because my value is X." Or, "Hey, did
Yeah,
you know every morning I wake up and my mantra is this? Are
they
you
don't know
curious
that.
about that?"
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I mean, like,
yeah,
sharing that with them
yeah.
and telling them why.
That's so interesting. That it's never really occurred to me to sort of operate at the meta level with those around me. I share things like that on this podcast a little bit and in these, but yeah, I don't share it with the people that are closest with me. How messed
Yeah.
up is that?
It's not, it's just very human. It's so human.
Mm,
And that's what I'm trying to interrupt with my book, and I say interrupt because I think kinda like with horses, they can kinda go in a rut. Like, they'll literally look for a rut to follow because it's easier to
mm,
kinda just go through the ring like that, and I think people do that too. And in no way am I saying you're in a rut, I'm just saying in general,
sure.
that's kind of where we go, and for humans, the experience might feel more like you're literally fitting your comfort zone as, like, a cloak or even a straitjacket. So you gotta be really careful, I think, as adults to make sure we don't, like, confine and get too cozy with this tight version of a limited comfort zone. You always have to expand it. And similar to kids, like, man, if we're not beginners often as adults, especially when we're successful leaders, be a beginner, feel that frustration of not being good at something, because right beyond that is play.
Hmm.
And going back to your theme, like, play. And what happens when you as an adult get to play is freaking dead sexy because it opens up this incredible new vortex of possibility. It's amazing. And honestly, when I finally got to that space with my writing coach with my book, it was like midway through writing the book. It's
Wow.
like chapter 5, it's started happening.
Hmm.
And what happened was my writing voice showed up
Interesting.
because of that. It was badass, and then I had to go back and kinda rewrite the first half of the book.
So we're going to come back to this because I think there's a lot to build on there, and this idea of getting into flow state, if I can call it that. There's many things we could call
Sure.
it, which I'm sure you're going to have plenty to say about. But let me catch people up. I met Ingrid through Lovesack because thankfully I have this amazing people team who set up an amazing conversation that Ingrid led. Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about that and kind of your work in that realm, and then I'm going to pull us back to what you just said, because I have a lot to talk about with you as it pertains to music, as it pertains to playing, and all of these other things to build on.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness, what an honor it was to come to Lovesac, and you do have such a phenomenal team. And they really were looking to make a meaningful experience connecting the dots around identity and inclusive leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So after having created in-house experiences like that with Mo at Gap Inc., which we delivered to hundreds of people on stage,
Yeah. Wow.
it was lovely to kind of bring that into these spaces to inspire people to think about like, oh yeah, what makes me feel psychologically safe and what are those conditions and how do I share more authentically myself? Like to what extent do I feel like I'm comfortable to choose a purpose-driven life that's a bit more bold than I allow myself? And if I'm not allowing myself to live in that truth, like what is holding me back? Is it a narrative? Is it a mental model? Is it the voice from my youth? Like what is it? And how do I challenge that in a healthy way that paves a path of pure choice? Another thing that Mo and I were chatting about before the session was like, do we talk about careers and like making sure you don't give away your power, but find a really powerful way to engage the people around you to do incredible work.
Mm-hmm.
So it's slightly different because sometimes when you give freely your power to work, there is no exact reciprocity. It's a little bit more of an exchange, like I pay you to do good work and whatever. But no one's asking you to give away your power, your soul. So I think what happens is people get a bit resentful when things aren't working out, when they're not getting super high marks or whatever, when they're not being like amplified or applauded in some ways. And you're like, well, if your only source of this power is to give away in an exchange that is actually more about you and your purpose in your life, that actually isn't the right mental model to approach your relationship and your identity connection to your job. But we didn't get into that, but that's
Mm-hmm.
something that we talked about.
Well, I mean, look, I appreciate it. It's a good little uh, sampler of Ingrid's expertise. I feel like, look, it was an hour-long conversation. We can only get so deep, but Ingrid was vulnerable enough to share some of her own experiences. We got into your mixed race background and some of the uncomfortable things that happened to you in your professional life, even as you're trying to, let's call it, achieve that state of play, flow state in like a job or professional setting. That's where people thrive, right? Like people, it's been scientifically proven that while some amount of stress and pressure can certainly drive organizations forward or people toward a task, people do not do their best work under those conditions. And so these conversations that you facilitate professionally are really fantastic. And the thing I loved about your approach, and the reason I wanted you on the podcast, is you do it in a way that is not so politically correct and not so careful and not so preachy and guilt ridden. I just think there's so much in the realm of let's call it, DE and I, to use kind of a
Mhm.
buzzword right now, a hot phrase that is, I don't know. It's just not, it doesn't land well with a lot of people. Uh, but it means well. Like the movement certainly means well. But I just felt like your approach to conversations in this realm was just so much more
Mm.
real. And as opposed to, I feel like using tons of jargon and dancing around
Mm.
a lot of sensitive issues, because there are a lot of sensitive issues and people do take some of these things really personally, but you have a unique way. And in that way, I think, that's why I was so fascinated that you chose this Shawnism, because it's so politically incorrect on its face. I wrote it on a
I'm a
resume
rebel.
because
Yeah.
I had no significant job qualifications, so that's all I got. And I was joking, of course, right? I think I was quoting Austin Powers, but it got me the job. And so, and here I am with some kind of personal development coach now talking about this topic. So before we go back to play, tell me about what was it about this phrase, and there's this Shawnism and the story behind it that caught your attention, and specifically, and you felt resonated with your work.
I would say that being really bold and authentic and leading with heart is dead sexy, because there's something around dead sexy is like not arguable. You see something like, damn, right? I want leaders and people to show up in a way where people are like, damn, because it's their like unapologetic, fierce self, but it's not attacking anybody, not trying to hurt anybody. It's truly just like, here's me in my essence. Here's me in my true power. And I'm doing it in a way that's not ego driven. I think that's the
Mm,
key.
mm,
And we all show up with fear. We all show up with our stuff, but we need to be driving the bus in our lives, right? Like, I can't have insecurity and fear taken over and the amygdala's like literally driving the bus. Like, that's terrifying. And I suddenly don't know, like, what is the goal here, the purpose, the plot, what's the North Star? But if you are driving the bus with all the stuff that you bring, and that's okay, they can hang out, your saboteurs and all this stuff, they're there, but you drive, that is powerful and dead sexy. And that's what I mean about stepping into that bold space of that truth. It's unapologetic, and it's arguably like, wow, damn. And it takes work to get there. So I feel like taking a spotlight on your terms. I was a musician for several years, and you're on literally a stage with a spotlight on you. And people put all different kinds of layering of things. They project a lot onto you, and you're like, whoa. And we can get into that if you want. But what's important is you actually have the opportunity, and there was other spotlights too I didn't like, being asked, what are you? And you're different, you are other. Those are spotlights too. They're unwanted spotlights.
interesting. But it's
But when
unavoidable
you
in your interactions, right? Because people perceive like, well, you're not white, but
right.
so then, you probably don't want to gratify them with the answer they're
No,
probably looking for.
no. I'm like, I'm a human on planet Earth. I'm part of this universe. And they're like so pissed off, like just so
Yeah,
mad.
but what are you?
Yeah, no, no. But where are your people from? No, where are they really from? That kind of stuff. I'm like, still planet Earth. The people are actually from New Jersey.
Oh my gosh.
So I just think it's important to know that despite all those kinds of experiences that are like, ugh, if you find the spotlight that works for you, and for me, it's leadership coaching, working and connecting with people, love that, like authentic connection, being on stage as a public speaker, sharing my story. That's my spotlight. And that's where I feel like, in my essence, in my truth, in my power, I'm dead sexy.
Okay, so what advice? Let's get tactical for a minute before we come all the way back. I think everyone, let me put a postulate out there. I think everyone listening to this podcast feels plenty of insecurity and otherness in their life at times. And even the most bold of us, I can be perceived. I'm the CEO of a public company. I'm a founder, an entrepreneur. I want $1 million on TV. Like, it's easy to look at people in the spotlight as having some amazing charisma or some superpower. But the truth is, if we're being honest, and I don't know anyone else's experience, but I know like my own, and I feel weird and, introspective and regret all kinds of things I say and do on a minute to minute basis, even as I'm probably projecting plenty of confidence and
Yeah.
plenty of facility. So, like, what advice do you have for people who really struggle with this, which I think is everyone?
Hmm. I think it's not hiding behind it, just again, sharing it bit by bit. Like, when somebody asks you something and you don't know, just say, yeah, I don't know. Even when they expect you to have the answer, or admitting like, "Oh, man, I made a mistake," instead of trying to, like, push it on somebody else, blame somebody else, hide it, or saying, "I need help."
Yeah.
A lot of people feel the pressure to have to figure it out on their own, and it's just not real. Like, I think it's good to just challenge, like, "Is this real? And where did this come from?" And being super self introspective to learn. I've made plenty of mistakes in my 20 plus career, plenty. And I learned from them. And that was a choice. It was hard. My ego was like, no, it's not my fault. This feedback can't be right. Yada, yada, yada. And I'm pissed off and want to vent. And, you know, sure, we're all human, but the real work is to sit with that and look at what is true for somebody and to be curious about it and want to question, like, wow, my team is saying that they don't feel like I show up vulnerably. This is like many, many years ago. And
Mm.
I was shocked to hear that. I'm like, oh, I show up authentically. Like, you don't let us ever feel like we can experience weakness.
Hmm.
And I was like, shit. And what I realized too in observing and processing my mom and writing this book and this story, which actually really is a leadership story if you like look at it, I learned that I come from a lineage of warrior spirit women. Like, literally there's warriors in my lineage.
Wow.
But what I also learned, being a warrior doesn't mean being strong. There are moments where it's silent. There are moments where it's really broken. There are moments that you need help and healing and support. And the moment that we lean into that with love and curiosity and wanting to connect and forgive, the liberation is profound because you can say, like, I also exist in the world where I can be confident and also insecure, but I also have dialogue with myself, like, ooh, was that harsh about myself? Did I just mean girl myself in my head? That's not nice. Like, that's just mean. Why would we do that? And it's like, oh, I'm putting pressure on myself because blah 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 blah. And
Mm.
then going through that introspection helps me return to myself and to say, I'm an imperfect being, and that's great. The goal is not perfection. The goal is not constant confidence. Honoring the moments where I feel uncertain and uncomfortable or fear, and to name it and also to share it. I think it's really important to share it. So I tell my wife times where I'm like, babe, I just don't know. Like, is this the right path? And just saying that out loud and connecting with her um, is part of what's going to solve to get out of it.
Yeah, and probably wildly strengthening to your relationship versus being so stoic as to not, uh, you know, expose her to your problems, your insecurities, your, things that might make you look weak, feel weak, or you might just not want to put that on someone. So that's what's amazing is there is a Shawnism in my book that builds into this as well. I call it maintaining, confident humility. And
Mhm. Mhm.
it's something I had to learn the hard way. Look, I was exactly what you would have expected me to be when Lovesac was getting off the ground and starting to rip and getting a lot of attention. And I'm this, 20 something aggressive entrepreneur, build multi-million dollar business captain, white guy charging through the world. And if I'm honest, like all of Lovesac's hardest times, look, we had to go through a full Chapter 11 reorg. We had to go through the most embarrassing, humiliating stuff. And in the end, it ultimately there's lots of reasons for it. There's lots of strange, terrible things that happened that led to it. But it ultimately is all my fault. It is all because I uh, made choices that weren't good enough. And I didn't allow a lot of my leadership team, who was older than me and more experienced than me, really own it, even though they were in those positions. You know, I had to prove everything, I had to see everything, I had to be the man.
Mm.
And it was after a couple decades of living through all the things that I think I developed enough humility, maybe we're never there, but enough humility to be more vulnerable, to really allow others to own things and lead and take the satisfaction that comes with that. And I was just reflecting last night on how important this idea of self-talk is that you tapped into just a minute ago. Not just how we speak about ourselves, because your mind will believe the things that you say, even if you don't really mean them. You know, like we have to be careful the things that we, you know, like, oh, you're such an idiot. You know, these types of
Ooh.
things that can come out naturally that we think we're being self-deprecating, but you know, that's not being self-deprecating. That's just damaging. And we have to have that self-control to correct that language, to avoid that language, and not even just that language, but even just crassness in our language, you know, like our self-talk, forget our language in the world. And especially our language to others. But it's crazy how sometimes we can be harder on ourselves and give the excuse, well, I'm as almost like a badge of honor. Like well, at least I'm harder on myself than I am on my children
Right.
or my spouse,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. That's not helpful. You know, there was an experiment that was done. I don't remember the source, but it's so coming up for me right now. So if we're predominantly vessels of water, right? We're mostly made of water. There was an experiment where there were 2 vessels of actual water, like glasses, and one water was being literally said really beautiful things. "Oh, you're so wonderful, and look at you, and you're crystal, blah, 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 and you do so much, you know, good for people and the earth, blah." And the other vessel was told terribly negative things, really harsh negative things. And the energy of those is really powerful because in the experiment, they took, extracted some water from both of those vessels and put it under a microscope.
Hmm.
And the water that had the positive, affirmative energy, the cells were forming like beautiful crystallized snowflakes. And the water that was tormented and put a lot of negative and painful energy into, the cells looked like bombs going off, like literally, like atomic bombs. It was chaos.
Wow.
And so what that tells me, and then they poured the water, I'm pretty sure, into plants. And you can imagine what happened to the plants. Like, I don't even have to say it, obviously. One died and one thrived. So that is even more interesting too when you take it to like water, we are mostly water, and how that energy also, that thought, the way it's delivered impacts us.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, it takes, you know, I feel like it comes up on every podcast, I swear, but I was once asked a long time ago, I've been asked, like, in my position, you know, you'd ask some version of this question, like, what's the secret to success? And honestly, thankfully, I early on, I read Dan Goleman's book, Emotional
Mm,
Intelligence, right? And I've said for 20 years, you know, it ultimately, the root of so much of it just comes down to self-awareness. Because with self-awareness and the pursuit of, or the relentless pursuit of this self-awareness, to really, as you're describing, analyzing our own thoughts, our own self-talk, our own behaviors, only then can we modulate them. Can we maybe control them? Can we maybe seek out, you know, better outcomes, better behaviors? But so that root of so much, only then can we, by the way, become successful, I think. So the very root of it is that idea of really trying to be honest with ourselves first. You know, you talk about being honest with others, being vulnerable. I think it all starts with being honest with ourselves, which can be hard to do because, you know, we have to face uncomfortable truths. And by the way, it also just takes more mental energy that we're already depleted from running around in life and keeping up with work or keeping up with kids or whatever it is that stresses us. But that's the game. And we can choose to succumb to just our natural selves, which will wreak all kinds of havoc with ourselves and those around us, or we can choose to expend the energy to try and do it better, from self-talk to external talk to, of course, our external interactions and everything else.
You're doubling down on choice, and I love that, because emotional intelligence, and I love that book, and I teach emotional intelligence a lot. That self-awareness is also like, people will say, "Oh, emotional intelligence is about controlling your emotions." It's absolutely not. It's absolutely about having that awareness and the social awareness and the relationship management so that you can better choose how you respond and react.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a choice that you have. You're not completely like fixed. This is how I feel. This was a trigger. This is what I believe is happening. This is how I behave. You have choice in how you perceive things and assume things, to be curious about it, to really understand what's happening. And that will correspond, hopefully, with how you decide and choose to react.
Yeah, there's nothing that makes me more frustrated with my own children when they use that for, you made me mad, when and they're talking to their sibling. And no one can make you mad. People can do things that cut you off, inconvenience you, all kinds of things. But in the end, it is a choice how we respond. And even if it happens in a microsecond, there's still a choice being made. And I think I don't mean to be pedantic, but and by the way, I run around failing at all these things minute to minute in my own life. And that's what's amazing. And I'm perceived to be someone who's pretty successful by the world standards in many respects, I think. And that's my point. And that's why I'm saying it out loud, is like, there is no one immune to this. There is no one immune to the struggle that it is to be a human and to experience all of these things. And what I love about what you keep finding ways to come back to is going beyond even, let's say, the behavior modification, going beyond our personal management, going beyond the management of our thoughts and our words and our self-talk, let alone the outside stuff, getting to sharing our experience out loud with those closest to us at times as a way to perhaps manage ourselves, as a way to perhaps do better, and as a way to enroll those that we care most about in our lives in a way that's, I think it's really unique. I think it's a really unique approach that I haven't really thought. It's like I take it to the 20-yard line. You take it all the way to the end zone.
Thanks, Shawn.
Yeah.
I also love that your kids are saying that, because if I were your family leadership coach for hire, that'd be really weird and funny, or just a friend.
I don't think I could afford
In
it.
In that moment, I might want to ask the daughter that's bringing that up, tell me what you just perceived happened. And where did that perspective come from? Is there a question you want to ask your sister, just to validate whether that belief is true or not? Because what's fascinating about that is like, well, what happened that a camera could see and capture, that a lot of this was made up in your own head? And usually it's a belief. Oh, she thinks I'm stupid, and therefore she said this thing, which basically validates that belief. That I'm stupid, or she thinks I'm stupid. And now I'm mad because I'm hurt. Because anger, the root of anger is pain, sadness. So, okay, why are you feeling hurt? What hurt you? What's the belief? If something actually didn't really happen, the belief is painful. But then if the person, whoever is happy, because this happens to us all the time, to your point, if I'm operating a world where, my God, that person is ghosting me and I'm really angry at them, but underneath that I'm really hurt, and I just ignore them back, well, then I'm losing the plot of what's real. Maybe I could do something to connect with them and say, hey, I'm so curious. My perception is that I'm being ghosted, and that's fine. Like, if that's what's happening, but I just want to know, is that real for you? And if that person is like, yeah, actually, I don't really want to connect, and here's why, you get more information. Or it's, no, I just had a real horrible death in the family. I'm definitely not ghosting you. I definitely want to connect, but I'm going through some shit. In both scenarios, there's so many different things we don't know. Why
Yeah.
don't we lean into curiosity instead of saying, I'm going to feed the fear, feed the insecurity that
Yeah.
says, I'm disliked, I'm misunderstood, I'm othered, I'm an outsider, and I'm ghosted. I'm worth being ghosted. Because those are lies.
Yeah.
Those are lies.
So let's loop back around to something you said
Okay,
earlier that I think I really want to go deeper on.
let's.
You were talking about play and how to get to that point where, in your case, writing your book, which I'm so excited to read. There's a copy in the mail, so I'm brand new. But let me go here, because you're a musician who has played for years on stage live. And that's another thing that thankfully has been a part of my life. And it is something that I miss tremendously. I only get to do it now, really kind of once a year now, recently. Believe it or not, my kids all play. I have 4 kids total. There's a son in there as well. He's actually usually the source of the problem. No, but
Uh,
I'm just kidding. But as brothers do. But we get to play, and now every year at this manager fest that we have for Lovesac, which you have a permanent invite to, Ingrid. So if you want to show up,
ooh,
please come out.
I'd love to.
Last
Thank
year
you.
it was headlined by Flo Rida. So my
Okay.
kids and me got to open for Flo Rida. And they play keys, guitar, drums, bass. I grew up a lead singer playing the keys and a little bit of guitar. And I got to do that through all of my 20s live on stage. I actually started playing in Shanghai, China. You'll like this.
Oh my goodness. Cool.
I grew up playing the piano and playing weddings and things like that. And I finally got bold enough. I was never a strong singer, but I was living in Shanghai, working as a management training consultant, delivering, believe it or not, human resources, leadership, presentation skills, team
Oh,
building
amazing.
courses in Mandarin to executives of McDonald's, Roche, Siemens, Whirlpool, Honeywell. This is before Lovesac took off. 1 year. And I didn't
Thank God.
really want to have like a dating life over there and stuff. So I'm like, I have all this time at night. So I'm finally gonna like really become a professional musician. I literally woodshedded. I was living at the Shanghai Teachers University, and they had 50 pianos in literal woodsheds. Um,
Wow.
Part of their music department. These are like dusty, dirty, wind blows in and out. And there's pianos. And I go over there every night for about a month or two. And I put on the headphones, took down, learned Bob Marley tunes, learned classic rock tunes, learned all kinds of different stuff that I could bang out on the piano and sing to. And because I
Mm.
just didn't care, like I didn't know anybody, and I'm this weird white guy, in China. I was
Mhm.
just singing, and I got bold enough to sing at the top of my lungs and become facile enough to be on a lead singer. Now, fast forward, I played 6 nights a week in Shanghai, twice on Thursdays and Fridays. Eventually got a band with me so people could dance. It was full cover band, all this stuff. Came back to the States, started doing it. Even as I was building Lovesac, I was playing weekends up in Park City, Utah, at all the bars, live
Wow.
on stage. Now I'm only going into this detail because, one, probably most people don't really know this about me, but two, there is something unlike anything else I experience almost when you play live music with other really good musicians. I was lucky enough to attract a few really good musicians around me for this band. We started
Mhm.
as a jazz band, eventually full jazz trio, improvising on stage. That turned into people wanting to dance more. That turned into a cover band. And like when you are in the pocket with people who are really good at what they do, and it's a live situation, it is just unreal how the kind of flow state that you can achieve, and the kind of things that you're able to do with your fingers, with your body, with your voice, things that you can't predict going in, things that you haven't rehearsed, things that come out with the reaction of the crowd and things like that. And it is so satisfying to me, and I miss it so much. And your comment that play is on the other side of, being a beginner and stumbling through those difficult times. In my case, I had to go as a beginner, woodshed a bunch of songs, and then literally get up on stage and
Yep.
start singing for the first time alone and hearing my voice through the system,
Mm-hmm.
and then learning how to listen as I'm singing
Mm-hmm.
simultaneously. That's when it
Mm-hmm.
really unlocked for me. When I really became, let's call it what I would call a professional that was worthy of being paid for this service, was not when I could, do the things that I had rehearsed, but when I started to really listen to how loud my piano was, how loud my voice was, how that was resonating, how close I could get to the mic or back off,
Mm-hmm.
even in this split second, as this is occurring and as I'm performing. And as I'm saying all this because I know that you know this feeling. And I just want you to expound on this idea of how we get into flow state, how we get from that place of the awkward beginning, which, by the way, isn't always a moment, isn't always a week, might be months, it might be years in that beginner mode before we get to play in
Yeah.
that way.
I love that you described all that because it's true that if you aren't a musician in this very particular example, um, it might be like something you're like, "Oh, that's new to me," or, "Oh, I have that in, like, a different form of play or
Yeah.
flow state." So it really resonates a lot with me, and taking it into these other levels where you're then kind of monitoring and curating what the experience is that you're having with the sound engineer and with the crowd. So all those things you kind of get into like a systems curation. It's really cool. But flow state, I realized that my best flow state as a musician, and even now as a writer, is not alone. So everything I've been talking about, like I need that accountability buddy, if some would call it. But for me, it's very specific creatives. I've had two bandmates in my life out of a lot of bands that I've been in where we are absolutely communicating and creating through music.
Yeah.
And it is a powerful experience. And then when that's taken and shared and people are singing along to your lyrics, um, I remember this like moment where I'm on stage, I'm singing the song, and it's sort of one of the songs that, is the band was the 303s. It was the first band that I'd ever signed. I was 23 years old. And
Wow.
the last band I was in was called Rad Pony, as in Radical Pony. And both of those bands are actually on Apple Music and streaming everywhere, but they're under the radar because they came out before all those streaming services were available. What's fascinating is watching people correct you when you say the wrong lyric because it's not the songs that you typically are singing all the time. It was like and you're like, "Oh my god, this is wild." And you're laughing because it's not serious, it's funny. And the fact that people are listening and the lyrics mean something
Hmm.
to them, where they were like, "Hey, no, 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 that's not the right word, it's this word," or "That's not the right phrase, it's this phrase." And you're just like, "Oh my god, this is hilarious and amazing." And yes, this is yours now too.
Mhm.
It's ours. We're having a shared experience. So I love that, and I think the more that we as adults are looking for that play and also flow state with the people we create with the most. And what's fascinating is oftentimes those flow states with other musicians are different than you. They approach things differently, they have different instruments, and that's why I think it's really important to not always hang out with or co-create or be in teams with people who are exactly the same or similar to you, because the most fascinating music that's ever created, in my mind, is because such different, um, backgrounds in how one learns and how one approaches that creativity makes the flow what it is, and people really react to it. It becomes a
Yeah.
magnetic force.
Yes. And being part of something, bands don't do well. I remember there were moments where I tried to sort of, as my band evolved, and I tried to sort of, get more done. We wanted to record an album. We wrote some originals, and I kind of commandeered it in a way to sort of like, because I'm a leader, I'm a whatever, I'm a doer. And, but a lot of times musicians are scattered and creatives and, they're late. And it's like, I tried to sort of like lead it like I would my company, because I was running the company at the time as well. And it does not work in that traditional way. And so you have to learn to sort of work with others in that format in a different way than you do like in a more hierarchical, traditional, sort of typical corporate capacity, for sure. And that was really beneficial to my development, because as I learned over time at business as well, that, remember I told you earlier, a lot of Lovesac's problems in the earlier days, where we went through some of the hardest things, were ultimately my fault as I reflect. And it was rooted in the fact that I kind of had to approve everything and do everything. I was too egotistical to truly allow others to own their territory, if I'm being honest today.
That's
And
beautiful, honesty.
and it was actually when I learned, and I can think even like sometimes, for instance, here, I'll share something really personal. Like you look at Lovesac, and now we have this color teal that was part of our branding since 2014, and it's on our signs and it's on our logo and it's kind of everywhere. It's on the product. And you would kind of think like, oh, that must be Shawn's favorite color since he was a kid or something, because the truth is it was brought to us by an agency as part of the package and the rebrand in 2014. And my marketing person at the time loved it. And I liked it well enough, but it's not like teal's my favorite color. My point is, I learned over the many years that even though others will do things very differently than I will do, or make choices that I might have made a different choice, that doesn't make it wrong. And in fact, what they choose can work just fine, can work great. My idea might have worked great, but just because it was my idea, if I go around thrusting all of my ideas on the organization, for example, or on my band, for example, it will not be long before I have disillusioned those around me. They may even continue to work for me, but working for someone is different than working with someone.
That's right.
And I had to spend most of my adult life figuring that out. And today, what's amazing is I try hard to make as few decisions as I possibly can. And trust me, there are plenty of decisions that I can make and do make and should make. But that's kind of a goal of mine, is to just say to people, like, you decide, and the more that I can push myself even to the point of discomfort to do that, the better the results. Not necessarily because they're making better decisions than I would have. They're certainly making different decisions often than I would have, but their way can work too. And the thing is, even if their way works 98% as good as mine would have been at 100, or vice versa, what matters is not only is it a great outcome, but like they feel so enrolled by that more than it's better than me paying them more. It's better than me praising them more. People expressing their autonomy through their work, whether we're talking about music, whether we're talking about sports, whether we're talking about a hobby, whether we're talking about a job, that autonomy expressed is something that is so satisfactory to human beings on the earth. And we have a chance to give that to those around us, including our own children, including our spouses, including our employees.
That's right.
And so
I love that.
I had to go through the beginnerness to get to the play where I feel like I can do more of what I just described to you as a CEO, as a leader. And sadly, it took me way longer than it should have. But just like the example of being a musician, you don't get the chance to stand on stage, experience pro audio, experience a live crowd without having at least enough ability, as my kids do. They're not super seasoned, but you know what? They can stand up in front of, at our manager fest, 1,000 people.
Yeah.
And play live.
Badass.
And look, it's a blessing, and it is look, I steal it. Like, I feel terrible in the sense, like, I'm in a position where that's possible, but on the other hand, I love it for them, because it's been so impactful in my life. And to be in that crucible where, like, it's not to say you can't mess up, but it is live. And it is humiliating if you do mess up, and you are walking on the edge every second that
Mhm.
passes as you're taking risks, to do this or do that or play this way or jump up and down. You're taking risks in real time. And there's something about living on that edge, because in music, you're always on the edge. If you're really pushing and not just playing it safe, because music is occurring over time. And so
Mhm.
technically, every second that passes, you have the ability to take risk and achieve an outcome. And I just love it for that. The only thing in my life I can liken it to that's not work is also dirt biking. Because when you're riding over terrible terrain at 40 or 50 or 60 miles per hour, you're similarly making decisions rapidly that have a huge amount of consequence. And it's
Yes.
these types of things, but I can't even do that with my friends. I just did it this morning. It's how I love to wake up. I can do it before work, even here where I live in Utah. I don't get to do that at that level unless I put in the time in the woodshed to get good enough at dirt bike to
Mhm.
even keep up with my friends or
Mhm.
play music with other, facile musicians. And that's the part that in this day and age, people want to shortcut. They would love to be on a band. They would love to ride a dirt bike. They would love to lead a company, but you got to put in the time. And for some of these things, it's years.
Yeah. I love what you were saying. I know we're kind of like getting to this wrap up spot, but I feel like you're right around one of the core leadership behaviors that I work with various companies on. One is cultivating a trusting environment, right? The conditions for people to thrive. But one is making sure that you have decision making power, like your team feels that they have decision making power, and how to let go. A lot of that is kind of what you're saying is play, but also letting go of control because control is a farce. There is no control. There is no set. There's only like, I'm trying to take this risk. We're in this together. Let's try to find play and find meaning along the journey. But who knows what the outcome will be? Here's the outcome we hope it to be. But we got to let go of trying to control because it's just, again, a lie. Control is a lie.
Yes. And I like to say, people ask me all the time, let's talk about control. I don't have ownership control of Lovesac. I don't have 51% of the company. In fact, through venture capital, private equity, going public, my personal ownership, has been diluted and diluted as it happens as you grow a company sometimes. How do you then maintain control, Shawn? You're 26 years in. Most founders are not leading a public company. They're replaced by professional management. My response is that's what I love about being public. I have to be awesome. The results have to be awesome. The company has to be awesome. Who controlled the 90s Chicago Bulls? Was it the owner of the Bulls? Do you even know who that was? I don't. Who was the coach? Was he in control? Who was in
Hmm.
control of the Chicago Bulls in the 90s? Michael Jordan.
The Bulls.
Michael Jordan. How did
Like the
Michael
Bulls.
Jordan maintain control? By being Michael Jordan. So like
Yeah.
it's not about a title, it's not about even ownership, man. It's about be your own version of Michael Jordan. Be the best you that you can be. And by the way, there is you and I have both witnessed black, brown, you know, gay, straight, fat, thin, some of the sexiest people alive, some of the people that are just the most attractive people are those that have found a way to be just confident and comfortable in their own skin.
And calm,
You
which was
know,
Michael Jordan.
yeah,
Just chilling
calm.
over here when it's time, when it's my time, I'm
And he was
ready.
calm because he was prepared,
Mhm.
you know? And if we can find a way to be prepared, to put our time in the woodshed and then have confidence in that with the humility, that's the confident humility, with the humility to allow others to make decisions around us and for us when they can, even if they're not the same as yours. That's the confident humility. The humility to believe in others around you and not just, try to control everything as you described. When we can have that kind of confidence, that kind of authenticity. I love where you took it. Be brave enough to share with those around us how we're really feeling in real time, expressing ourselves when we can in a bold, sort of vulnerable way, and the confidence to do that. We are dead sexy.
Yeah.
Like, these people. It's not even, they transcend their physical appearance. They transcend their title.
Yeah. It's their truth and their essence.
Yes.
It's just powerful
and
gravitational.
And so, look, we've wandered on this verbal journey. These are difficult concepts to pin down, but find a way to gain confidence in being yourself. I love what you said, expressing yourself and putting yourself in a position where you get to play and play with others. And I believe that you can find this place that you and I think both are familiar with through our various experiences, riding horses, riding dirt bikes, playing on stage.
Yep. Writing books.
Any last bit of wisdom? Look, let me save you 25 years, the name of the podcast, Ingrid. How would you, on this topic, around this topic, or anything else, how might you save one piece of advice from your expertise to save someone a chunk off their own 25-year journey?
You have one life to live, so choose to live boldly.
That is dead sexy. All right, Ingrid Hu Dahl, where do we find your book? Where do we get that?
You can get this on sunshiningonmorningsnow.com/buy, but honestly, you can get the book now as an early access on Amazon, Porchlight, Barnes & Noble, Bookshop, you name it, you can get it. And I can't wait to see what you think. Please leave a review for me.
What will people take away from this book, Ingrid?
New ways to really connect and be empathetic. You're going to experience my journey from my eyes and the ways that I lay bare. And that laying bare, I'm already seeing people have conversations like we started out having, Shawn, this morning, where it's like, did you tell your kids about your mantras? Are you sharing with them what's happening in this moment? That's going to happen more. We're going to connect and relate as humans, having a human experience in a way that is more meaningful after reading my book.
Ingrid Hu Dahl. Follow her on Instagram, as I do, at INGRIDHUDAHL. Be sure to grab a copy of her brand new book, Sunshine on Morning Snow. Ingrid, thank you so much to the inspirational indie rocker, the amplifier of the underrepresented, the dead sexy doll herself, Ms. Ingrid Hu Dahl.
Thanks, Shawn.
And remember, when you lose confidence, whenever you start talking yourself out of something, don't forget to just tell yourself, I am dead sexy, because that alone may just be the way forward, may save a chunk off your own 25-year journey. Appreciate you.
Once a year to take my friends away should not be the budget for your bike across America.
TikTok has become an aggregator for some of the dumbest human actions.
When I won that million, I was $2 million in debt, barely